Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining this plenary session on the future of tech education. On Tuesday this week, at the UK Tech Cluster Group Conference, Oliver Dowden, the Secretary of State for DCMS, announced that a new national digital strategy is to be published in the autumn. His speech contained the paragraph, "We will be looking at ways to build a highly skilled digital workforce across the UK so that people can shift into the digital or tech sectors or digitise their own business." Of course, many of us in the region have been pushing this agenda now for a long, long time. Nevertheless, this was positive reinforcement that tech, and specifically tech skills, will play a critical role in our ability to recover from COVID and therefore deliver future prosperity for our region and for the UK. This signposts where we need to be, but right now, as with the rest of the UK, a massive amount of pressure has been put on the education sector, not just around the challenges of the physical measures such as social distancing, but also around topics such as distance learning, accessibility, and student and staff well-being. Right across the sector, schools, colleges and universities have been forced to review what they do and how they do it, right down to the traditional fabric of the education system. Questions like, has EdTech finally come of age? And are digital delivery methods the future? What might some of the benefits or the challenges be from those new ways of working? And what might these be on students and on the education system generally? Has COVID in many ways created a perfect storm for education? Was education working as effectively as it might have been before COVID? Or were the cracks already starting to appear? How might all of this then affect the relationship between education and industry, which a lot of work had been going on to try and build those bridges anyway? And if the majority of learning moves to digital, what happens to the regional student economy? And what are we going to do with all of the great buildings that we've created for education? All big questions. And today we've assembled a formidable panel to help us talk about some of these. So I'm delighted to introduce Siobhan Fenton, who is the Associate Dean at Teesside University, Becky Strachan, the Deputy Pro-Vice Chancellor at Northumbria University, Faculty Pro-Vice Chancellor, sorry Becky, I just promoted you there, Deputy Faculty Pro-Vice Chancellor at Northumbria University, Alastair, who's having a little bit of connectivity trouble, so he's not on right now, but he may well hopefully get on later, who's the Academic Dean at the University of Sunderland, and John Ridley, who's the Assistant Principal at Newcastle College. And I'm Stuart Lynn, who's Visiting Professor at Sunderland University and Board Member of Dynamo North East. So I'd like to get straight in and kick us off with the first question to the panel, really. And that is, so how have you handled COVID so far? And what are some of the lessons that you've learned? John, can we start with you, please?
Yeah, of course. Hope everyone can hear me. I think one of the things that we did quite quickly was realize that we needed to provide reassurance for students and where necessary their parents about seeing, the one of the better term, closing this year out, assuring both their safety and also to secure their futures. And we needed to be very clear with our students on that. I think what I've learned as well is just how resilient and the ingenuity that educators have shown across the school, colleges and universities. And that was something that we've really benefited from. So reassurance is really important from a safety point of view and also from where do I go next? And then as we've worked through that, we've then pivoted quite quickly to think about, okay, so what does next year look like? And I'm sure we'll get into that in this discussion.
Yeah. And Becky, what about Northumbria? Oh, Becky, you're on mute.
Yes, sorry, I didn't mean to be on mute. So, hi everyone. At Northumbria, I think, yes, like John, we wanted to put the health and safety of students and staff first, so that was our priority. We were getting towards the end of our teaching year, so our teaching year normally finishes end of April with assessments in May. So we did some online, we moved to finish off some of the online teaching. I think some of the main challenges for us is probably, and particularly for my faculty, is around some of those more technical and engineering and practical subjects. and how you do that, because we still had students wanting to go into labs and collect data and run software and so on, and trying to accommodate that was one of the key challenges that we had to work through. So we looked at what work they'd done so far and saw how we could take that. But every student was probably in a different position, so that was quite a challenge, I think, across the piece.
Yeah. And Siobhan, down in Teesside?
Yeah, I mean, really similar in terms of that sort of monumental challenge, really, just like John was saying, just amazed at how what we have, what everybody's achieved, to shift everything online has just been incredible, really. But again, similar to Becky, big challenges around, particularly for our students, like you're saying about engineering, but also for us in terms of computing games, when computing animation, when they have really high-tech kit. And also, as universities, we've promoted all these amazing facilities, and that's like a key issue, because obviously now, perhaps of course they haven't got access to those, so we've had to be really careful and make sure that those students aren't disadvantaged. We've got the students who obviously need access to the kit, but also got lots of other, issues which, again, like John touched on, that we have to really, really support. That could be caring issues, just access to even low-level kit as well. So that's been a big challenge, but amazing how we've actually shifted everything online as well.
Yeah. And Alastair, welcome. I'm glad you could join us.
Me too. I'm not stressed at all. It's fine. I love technology, me.
Just in time, mate. So what about University of Sunderland? We're just talking, Alastair, there about what have been some of the challenges and how have you reacted to those so far?
Oh, it's a really good question. I mean, I heard Becky and Siobhan saying about their institutions, and very similar. We applied a principle of no detriment, so that the students would, as far as possible, wouldn't be disadvantaged by not being able to access kit. We very quickly went on to online. Any assessments or exams that needed access to facilities, we changed the assessment. With make sure that our external examiners were happy with it, so we made sure that the standards were there. It's a really difficult balance to make sure that you are keeping the bar at the right level, and so I think we've done that. We're just going through the exam boards at the moment. The thing that I have noticed is that the speed of change and the preparedness to change, or the willingness to change, we're rushing things through that I've been pushing for 2 or 3 years, and we did in 2 or 3 weeks. And so it's fantastic, and not in our universities and colleges, but across the UK and indeed across the world. Folks have been really innovative in what it is that they've done to make sure that this cohort of students and then the incoming cohorts of students are not disadvantaged.
Yeah. And 12 weeks in, just a general question, is there anything that any of you would have done differently?
I can add to that. I think what was really when we got into that phase of the students who had, very similar to Alastair in terms of no detriment policies, we did all that, but that phase of those students who were ready to get employment, because there are still, they are recruiting out there, even, virtually. It was really interesting. Perhaps some universities reacted to that really quickly in terms of online showcases, really fast. And we've done that now. And I think, gosh, that was some of them sort of, got right, not in this region, but we saw some kind of really interesting examples of that. And now we've done that, so that the students who are ready can get their work actually online, ready. And again, similar to Alastair, what's brilliant about that is we're now realizing, gosh, we should have done that every year. And this is a fantastic thing that we should be doing, is showcasing the work online as well as doing real face-to-face events. So we could have been, I suppose you could say, be quicker as well on that.
Yeah, I think picking up on that point from Siobhan and Alastair, certainly what Alastair said, I think we've achieved things across the sector that we've been in 12 weeks that with the voices in the wilderness in some sense have been asking for 3-4 years. Yeah. And so it's not necessarily what I would do differently looking back after a 12-week period. It's perhaps with some reflection as to how we could have improved quicker. Yeah. I mean, in terms of really been an opportunity that we've grasped as a sector.
I think it's opened up a whole series of questions for us around what we think of as best practice, and some of the things that we have implemented, you think, ooh, that was better than we'd been doing before. So that's a big learning thing. So I don't think we'll go back to where we were before. But it's also brought into sharp focus that not everybody is got the same opportunity. So things like access to broadband, space in your house to have peace and quiet, what to do with the kids, what to do with all the other challenges that are then in your face rather than being removed from education. And some places in the northeast that don't have the same coverage, so they don't have the same access as we might have in the centres of population. So, and it's really brought that into sharp focus, I think, Stuart.
Let's swing back to that in a little minute, Alastair, because I'd be really interested to find out, so what you're going to do about that. How do you cater for people who have limited access? But we'll swing back to that. But I've got your name down on the list, okay, Alastair, for that one. I think Siobhan mentioned this as well about, the rush to move courses online. I remember seeing something from Durham University. We haven't got anybody from Durham, so we'll not be disingenuous. But it's like, right, all of our courses are going online. That's it. It's fantastic. The whole education system changed. I mean, is that really the answer? Is online teaching like the future? Does that mean the death of the lecturer? Do not need lecturers anymore? Just got, artificial intelligence, robots that sort of deliver these courses online. Is it as easy as that? John? Siobhan, you go first. You started it with your question.
Go on. I think we're just absolutely ready for a kind of hybrid approach. I'm just talking about this hybrid, but we really are, because it is, the generation, and I've got, kids of that age, they want to be there, they want that face-to-face, they want all that, but we're in a very different world, and we have to accept that, and we have to look at a very much a hybrid. And a bit like what Alice is saying, there are some really great, by going online, we've had some really great benefits from that and great examples. Like we're just doing now virtual sessions with industry now, and we're thinking, why did we always try and, I know it's lovely to have face-to-face, but why did we always try and bring them here every time, but actually, there's so much we can do. We can learn from what we've done. So I think it is an absolute hybrid approach. Yeah.
John, you were going to come in?
Yeah, just almost echoing exactly what Siobhan said. I think we're starting as a sector and education in general to move away from producing online or virtual content to an online learning experience, and really beginning to recognise that the social aspect of learning is really important. So while we might be physically distancing, we're still making the social experience possible. And as Becky and Siobhan said, looking at how students can then still access all of the learning opportunities they would have if they were on campus. I think that's something that we've certainly as a sector in 12 weeks, the importance of social collaboration at a physical distance.
It allowed us also to reflect on what we do face-to-face, because actually is what we've been doing face-to-face the right thing? So it gets us to evaluate that and think, can we make better use of that? Because as you go online, you can't just shift and put lectures online, for instance, who wants to watch an hour's video. So it allowed us to review our whole teaching practice and think about what we want to do. I think that access to specialist services and so on to resources is a really interesting one for how we do that. And yes, you can put so much of that online, but actually, doing that face-to-face, I think, is really useful. But I think it's been a real wake-up call, and it's got us to a place where, as Alastair said, we might have wanted to be in 3-5 years' time. We've got there very much quicker than that during COVID. I think now there's a chance to consolidate and just reflect on the lessons learned more blended than it has in the past. But I think a real critical thing for students, and one thing I didn't realise quite so much, is how much informal learning takes place. And so when they're on campus, they're often just getting together, discussing, and trying to replicate that online, I think, can be more difficult.
Yeah. And obviously you can appreciate that with sort of, university education. What about colleges or things like T-levels? How will this affect people that are going to start Alastair, I know you're smiling because you've been heavily involved with T-levels. Be interested in your view, Alastair, but John's as well.
No, it's a really good question. Sorry,
no, please.
Particularly around the work experience that T-level students are expected to do and internships. If I could just share one with you, and it speaks to the previous question as well. I've just finished having 2 interns from one of our partner colleges in France over at Rennes, and they were going to come over and they didn't. So I tweaked the internship task a little bit. I spoke with them twice a week. They worked together at a distance, so they had their social group. They didn't know each other before, and it worked reasonably well. I probably gave them more time than I would have done had I been on campus, if I'm honest. And they got a lot out of it. They managed to get all the learning tasks and things. But the thing that they said they really missed was the opportunity to come over to the northeast and live and be in a different environment, explore the countryside. Go up to Hadrian's Wall, do all the things that you would do as a tourist or as a guest, but also to avail themselves of the university facilities, whether it's going to a different library or whether it's going to the student union or whether it's using the sports facilities. All of those things which are part of that university experience are even more difficult to replicate than the technical kit. So we need to think very carefully about what that offer looks like moving forward. Sorry, John.
No. Very similar to what you're going to say. I was just going to say that I think the challenge is probably for T-levels at the moment one of capacity, not only with respect for businesses to support industry placements, but finding time just to concentrate on T-levels when they're faced with all the challenges of COVID-19. However, I think what we've all kind of touched upon is the theme of opportunity, and that the education sector and the business sector is looking forward with pragmatism and optimism in equal measure. And so it comes back to collaboration and co-creation between businesses and further education, and then start to see that the T-levels are an investment. Investing your time is an investment in your workforce, and passing that on to universities. It's investing in a rich workforce.
So the schools and colleges that are looking at T-levels, it's almost forced them to collaborate. I see Chris Windley's asked a question, what's T-levels? It's a new qualification, a technology level qualification to be more vocational than A-levels, but at the same academic challenge as A-levels, in a nutshell.
Yeah. But swinging back to this question on sort of equitable or access. So if we imagine a world where everything moves online, have we sort of created a privileged education system where only the people who can afford the technology and the bandwidth can access education, and the sort of the underprivileged people, underprivileged families who can't or don't have access to this just can't then get higher education? Is that a reality?
Yeah.
Or,
I think it's something we need to be really, really aware of, Stu, and things like being able to give students kit as part of their coming into university. I know at Teesside they give iPads at the minute. We're looking at giving appropriate level PCs. Of course, when you start to get into specialist things like games development or forensic investigations, you need a bigger spec machine, which is problematic. But I'll give you an example. We have of partner colleges overseas. You've been to Botswana with me this time last year. Yay! And when they went into lockdown, not only do they not have access to broadband, they don't have electricity, or a constant supply of electricity. So we gave SIM cards. We posted out SIM cards to every student so they could use their phone and they could try and get as much of the learning on the phone. So there are ways and means round, not necessarily the best solution, a bit kind of Heath Robinson kind of thing. But, we need to be aware of these situations so we don't create an elite, we don't create an environment of haves and have-nots.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's massive, and it's definitely massive. Exactly for us, with the computer animation, with the computer games. Really, we've really seen that, in terms of that. And when we were saying we won't be disadvantaged, when we had the no detriment policy, all that. But it is really clear that we've got to support those students. And exactly like Alastair saying, we're just looking at all those different ways of whether it's we supply dongles, do we supply, we do iPads, do we go into laptops, all that, and also. But also just looking at other options about accessing the software, with things like Apps Anywhere and all the different, not all, it doesn't work perfectly, but we really need to look at all those solutions as well to make sure it is fair, because it's crucial. Yeah.
I think it's also more than just the kit, actually, because the kit is one thing, but actually people are at different levels of what I'd call digital fluency. And so you might be really good at just doing social media, WhatsApp on your phone to talk to friends and family, but it's very different doing education online.
Yeah.
And that goes for both staff and students. I think we have, you know, I've seen people at our place, quite senior people, quite nervous about teaching in an online environment because it's very different from a face-to-face. So I think there's some real challenges going forward with that. I think the other thing we have to think about is the health and mental well-being of students too, because we don't want them to be online all the time. So a real challenge for us as we move to this blended learning is how much screen time are we expecting them to do?
And indeed the screen time with staff, Becky, that you know that when this started off, the first couple of weeks, the feedback from some of our staff was that they were frightened to move away from the screen in case they missed something. You know, so they're becoming they use the term addicted, and so they're putting in much longer days. You know, starting at 8 and going on till, you know, like 8, 9 o'clock, just in case something came in, and that's not sustainable.
I mean, if I may just give it a slightly different. It's not that I don't agree with it with the panels. I do, but I wonder if I think there's always been a risk that education is for the privileged at universities and colleges. There's always a risk, and universities and colleges work hard to make sure those that can access it do access it. Yeah. And I wonder if as Becky said, I think it's right. Digital fluency, teaching the skills to be discerning about the content you're coming into contact with online, because you know in some ways the online has democratized access to education, and technology might give the opportunity for students who wouldn't normally be able to attend a campus because of care responsibilities, because of work, and so. I think it's combining everything that's just been said with considering the opportunities of access that it does provide. That being said, we have to be very conscious of not making the gap of inequality yawn because of access to equipment or Wi-Fi.
I think you're quite right, John. That it does. We've noticed that some students who found difficulty coming on campus were actually engaging more. You know, so that's interesting. The flexibility about when people learn is there as an option, which is great. But we do need to make sure that, you know, that so people who maybe don't feel as comfortable being online, so they don't like, you know, being on Teams or on or whatever platform we're using, they're not disadvantaged.
Totally agree with that.
It's interesting. Just on the flip side of that, coming back to something Becky said before, you were talking about the sort of social element of education, Becky, where people like to be with people. And it's interesting, you know, there's a school at the end of my street here, and I see the kids on a morning like bouncing along the street. Now, you couldn't drag them along before, but now that they've gone back, and it's because they missed the friends. And, you know, we all know that our friends that we make at university are friends that last for the rest of our lives generally. You know, how are you going to try and, in a hybrid model, how are you going to try and deliver some of that, you know, non-teaching care that you would find in university or college infrastructure?
We're certainly working really closely with our Students' Union at the minute. So we've set up a group, particularly a work stream, to look specifically at that, working with our student support people. So looking at the inclusion aspects, as well as with our Students' Union, the sports centre. So how can we provide activities online or, you know, face-to-face, depending on what happens with lockdown going forward. So I think it is a really interesting question. And also, you know, a lot of students come to Newcastle, certainly to our university, because of Newcastle, the city itself. And so we're also looking at how can they experience Newcastle in a more socially distanced way, which it's not easy to do, but we're really conscious of trying to do that. So we're trying to think how many of the student union societies, and we think they'll probably become more subject-based this coming year, so that we might try and link it more to programmes and how they can then provide a bit more of a social aspect for all of those programmes to support them.
Yeah.
So I'm smiling, Becky, because that strikes a chord. So based on a sample of what my daughter in Lancaster said to me, why the hell would I ever go back if the pubs and bars are all shut? Why would anybody go to Lancaster? Because the campus university, of course, as well. So it's a slightly different view as well. Yeah. So anybody else got a view on, you know, that sort of the softer side? It's not really a softer side, it's a very important side of the whole thing.
We're just looking at induction week and just being prepared for whether that's going to be all online or it's going to be a mix, and just coming up with all those options. So that, I mean, induction is usually, it is about setting kind of really interesting kind of team challenges that are also fun, and we just try to make sure that we have those in all the different options depending on what's going to happen when we come back. But yeah, we've just been looking at the whole induction week really in detail, similar to what you're saying, Becky, about the student union. So yeah,
we're developing onboarding sessions for the students, so that they don't just get thrown in the first week. That there's some a set of activities to get them used to blended learning, hybrid learning, because it's the kids at school have been thrown into Google Classroom or whatever it is, and they do particularly well. And I watched my daughter doing things. She's got 3 different machines going on with different chats happening and different activities, and it's just fantastic. But that then picks up the question about availability and diversity and inclusivity, of course. But we need to be aware that it's a big transition for school leavers and folk coming back to education, going into colleges or universities, if it's face to face. But it's an even bigger challenge or a different challenge going in with that blended approach, a hybrid approach. So we need to be very careful about how we signpost people and bring them in and get them used to a way of learning that is it's going to be their new normal.
Yeah, so that's an interesting area that you're talking about there as well, Alastair, and I think you touched on it as well. But people come to Newcastle for Newcastle, Teesside and whatever. Some people stay, at local universities. If everybody offered a digital learning experience, why would anybody ever go anywhere?
The Open University already does, doesn't it? So, and you can see that's attractive for some people. It's brilliant, but actually, I think people do want to come and be part of that face-to-face community as well. But we're not particularly. We're doing a lot of work at the minute about the students that applied to come next year. And we surveyed them to see, current indications are most of them still want to come. But what we will do is we're putting in a whole transition piece of work with them to get them on board far more than we would have done in previous years, I think. I think it's more of an unknown for them. And that includes, what will happen around accommodation. So what are the bubbles that will happen in accommodation if we're still socially distancing? Because, you think of a lot of our accommodation, there's single rooms. But actually, how do we get those students to be together in some form? If they do actually come and stop with us, we think we'll get less people coming into our accommodation, actually. Then, a whole series of trying to get some of our current students to work with them before they come. So they're already creating those communities, I think, before they get here. And then, as Siobhan says, working on sort of induction that allows them to actually be together. And you can do some fun things online. But I still think they'll want that face-to-face, both with each other and with staff.
Yeah.
John, you were trying to come in there?
Yeah, again, just to support, I think, the idea that ed tech and online virtual learning is a panacea. It's not. People are multifaceted, aren't they? So to kind of group all students together and say, well, if you offered everything online, as Becky rightly points out, OU already does that, then students will stay where they are. I just don't. I don't see it. I also think as well, picking up what Alastair said, I think we're doing a lot of work to catch some of our staff up to the complexities and nuances that our young people who are coming to study with us are already very au fait with. And so it's, I think we, in some instances, I would caution against just trying to return back to what was, but do what we just described as a hybrid model that really celebrates and gets the best of what technology can offer now, but with the offer of, as Becky said, this social aspect. Because learning, we're in the business of education, of changing knowledge, skills, and behaviour. That, by definition, certainly in the creative fields, is very collaborative, and you need that almost instantaneous reaction.
I think that's a good point, John. I think some students, I've met a few students over the years. And some of them are disappointed when they go to college and university because the technology they're using is far inferior to the technology that they're using at home. Certainly if they're into gaming and they've got high-spec PC. Alastair's looking surprised, but we had a good talk about index learning.
Not surprised, but it is one of the the challenges for us, and it's one of the USPs, isn't it? Some of the equipment, particularly in the area of games or in cybersecurity or forensics, where the licenses are too expensive to have individually, and as a university we can offer that. So you're quite right, Stuart. You've got to do something different and hopefully better than the kids can do at home if they're going to get them on campus, and that, you know, really the situation we're in has encouraged us to think about why students would want to come to campus, and some of the conversation that we're having here is great. And it's some of it's about the specialist equipment, of course it is, but some of it's also about the social side, that different learning, how we have just redeveloped one of our buildings and stripped away sort of classroom space to make it a much more professional networking space for students to either talk to themselves, you know, amongst themselves, or to bring in clients to talk to, or, you know, like that sort of thing. And I think that's where the way we're all going to go.
Well, hopefully that has to happen, Alastair, when we get through this thing. I mean, it would be a travesty to having to spend all this money on places like NICD, which I know that's Newcastle University, for it to lie, you know, completely open and or have a handful of people rattling around inside. So hopefully this will get back to a semblance of normality sooner rather than later. Go on, Siobhan.
I don't know if you can see the chat. So folk are talking about future learning and the like in the chat. So there's a whole set of people like Future Learn, like LinkedIn Learning. You know, all of these things are coming through. And fantastic resource. And that whole thing around shared resource, and not that's all having to invent the wheel slightly differently is something that is going to happen. So you'll do an award at Teesside or at Northumbria or at Newcastle College or at Sunderland, and it'll have its flavour, but we'll be picking in stuff from all sorts of different places.
Apologies to the people listening in. I can't actually see the chat on my screen. I'm still seeing.
I'm
still in the green room.
Well, I'm here then after all, isn't
it? You mentioned very, very briefly finance in one of the earlier answers, and this is a question for everybody really. I mean, so you know you've changed at the speed of sound, where you've done stuff that takes 2 weeks that would have taken 2 years, if not longer. How much did that cost you? Did that cost you more money to do that, or less money to do that?
More time, I would say. I mean, the staff are really committed to the time, you know, to you know, turn their sessions so they're online. But again, and we might be talking about this a bit more in a minute, we've learned so much from that now that we did it, we're all amazed that we did it, it was fantastic, but now we're sort of evaluating it, what works, what doesn't. But it was just that staff time, the investment from staff and commitment was incredible, I think, that they just went for it. Yeah.
And there is this myth that online learning is cheaper to deliver. It most definitely isn't. I think though the move to online learning is, you know, as I said earlier, it allows us to reflect on what we currently did face to face, which I think has been really important. And I think we're being more inclusive going forward too. So, you know, certainly in May for us, doing online exams and things were a real challenge. And it's really questioned our approach to assessment and how we can make it better assessment for learning, and how for people with a range of backgrounds and those with sort of, you know, particular requirements where we would have given them extra time in exams, how do we do that? And so I think going forward, we'll actually have a more inclusive, you know, there is this worry about that divide, as we said, but actually I think we will improve our offer around that going forward. I don't think we're there yet, but
I think, John, to sort of before, it's not just about producing content and whacking it online. It's about the whole experience, because, you know, one of the things that I used to get was the lecturer or the staff member would be able to identify people in the theatre who were struggling to get something, or you could turn to the side and just say to a friend, "Look, I didn't understand that bit. What was it really meaning?" So you know, how do you produce an online learning course that can actually work autonomously?
I mean, we've all been using learning analytics for a while, Stuart, and you know, to try and spot students at you know, who are struggling, whether it's, you know, like electronic attendance monitoring, or their use on the VLE, or how quickly they respond to things, or how long they're spending on a particular task. And I think that's going to evolve and develop so that, you know, you're in that face-to-face where you could see that a student was panicked. Then you know, we can use the technology that they're utilising to understand the level of engagement.
Yeah. And coming back round to, I said I'd call you back in, Alastair, to the point you made before, was about the speed of change has been really good. How do you make sure just slip back into the old way of working. You know, those really slow, really dreary ways of doing education that were all. I'm joking. How do you make? How do you keep it mental?
I don't know. Yeah.
I'm sure you know, just at Siobhan's point before about how hard the staff have worked, I bet they've had some great fun as well, Siobhan. I know it's been tough, but I bet they feel like a great sense of achievement. So how
and they've learned loads, you know, they've had, I mean, there's a member I spoke to recently, and he was, you know, because it's all about that lovely mix of, you know, a live lecture and then a non-recorded lecture, setting challenge, all that. And he was saying, gosh, you know, it's quite a challenge to do that sort of live lecture or even recorded lecture, and it has to be a very different style, and of course, but it's actually made them, you know, of course there's been some, you know, situation where they've thought, gosh, I've really achieved that, that's been incredible, I'll learn from it. It's been hard work though, you know, to get through to that, but now it's, like I was saying, it's about sort of just evaluating that and getting ready for next year, but at least they've had a sort of really great go at it, the taste of it recently.
And I think for our IT teams too, they've really looked at, Stu, how they can provide our students with stuff that you can access off campus. So some of the more specialist resources now, they're giving cloud solutions to.
Yeah.
And so that will benefit students, because I think they've just been a bit slow to do that in the past because students could come on campus and do it.
Yeah.
But I think overall, we will be able, you know, students will have a better offer off campus now than they ever had going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I mean, I've now found out how to work the chat on the side so I can see it. And there's Phil Strachan puts a question about we need to focus on community space for community activities, things you can't do online. And I think in education, that's exactly what we'll be doing now. We won't be going through lectures I'm guilty of delivering at times where the students could have read it before the session. And you can then really use be discerning about what you use face-to-face time for. So I can see in that evolution a real consideration of when students are on campus, what you're bringing them on campus to do something that they couldn't typically do online. And I think that's something we really have to focus on.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point.
So I'm hearing that, you know, COVID has been that perfect storm, is probably a horrible word to use, but it's provided an opportunity to have a good look at the education sector and kickstart certain parts of it and get rid of some of the bits that, you know, you've always wanted to do differently, really, but couldn't for whatever reason. You know, is that now the sort of mantra? You know, are all your staff on board with that, or have you still got people that can remember the good old days? I'm all my commercial life. There's always people that think, "Oh, way back in 1982, it was much better than this." It wasn't. It was pretty horrible. We had power cuts and all sorts. But
you know, I'm sure everybody in the room, on the panel here, and everybody in the room that's got any management experience know that you spend 90% of your time with 5% of your problem staff, and whether it's online or face to face, it's the same problem staff. And so the folks that you have difficulty with, and for one reason or other, face to face, are the folks you have difficulty with online. Some things never change.
I mean, I totally agree with what Alice has said, and I also can see it in the chat where people are talking. There's a debate, and now we're moving from digital island being by itself, to education island being by itself, where digital people who are enthusiasts and adopters of digital kind of know all the benefits of digital. Now the benefits of digital and the opportunities, rather than the benefits of value judgment, the opportunities of digital are known in education. So I think now while it's been discussed and championed by certain groups, it's now in conversation. It's a daily conversation. You know, it is first and foremost as an option you can use. It's not, oh, that's not for me. That's for somebody else. Or he or she's really good at that. You should talk to them about it. I do something different. Now, has it been a forced change where individuals, colleagues, students are aware of what's available? And I think that's why we won't be able to roll back.
So we're into our last 5 minutes now, and I just want to sort of try and bring us to a close by putting a question out there saying, okay, so moving forward, if you could only each pick one thing to do differently, big thing, what would it be? Or one thing to keep from COVID, what would it be? Could be
For me, I think it would be making sure that our assessment is more inclusive and actually provides a real learning opportunity, Stu. So I think we've had a real opportunity to reflect on how we assess as part of our learning and teaching. And so keeping that, I think, would be really important. So we really think about the assessment and link it into the learning experience for the students. That would be my takeaway.
I'll go, Stuart. Mine would be around the way which we haven't touched on as much, but how we work with industry, because I think for me it's just been brilliant. There's been so many in terms of time wasting, if we're honest, you know, there's just been so many great examples of how it's worked really, really well. All this online discussions, online chats, Teams, Zoom, virtual sessions for students, having everything ready, you know, online in terms of student showcase of final year work, you know, that's just great. So just embracing the online for industry. Again, combining it with how we do some great face-to-face events, etc. But there's just been so much where you've thought, why did we do that like that in the past? And actually, this is brilliant. So yeah, that would be mine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's forced us to think about an awful lot of things that we wouldn't have thought about, if that makes sense. So from my perspective, particularly thinking about equality and diversity and inclusivity, and not just thinking about a small section of the student population, but everybody, so that we're designing learning opportunities that everybody can have access to. Yeah, and that's the big takeaway. I mean, we've talked about it in principle before, and all sort of banged the drum, but it's really happening, and I think it's a real opportunity for us.
Yeah, and John.
Everybody stole the best answer. So I'll have the weakest one. No change there. I mean, I'd be really encouraging fundamental and basic digital skills for society. I think we've talked about change a lot, but if we're to sustain and equip those people with the tools they're going to need and the opportunities for online and virtual learning, then I really think we need to address that.
If I can just say one thing, so just John's reminded me that we're starting to look at new things that are coming out of this. So we've been working with colleagues at Ubisoft to look at digital content managers, and so there are going to be new types of jobs that we haven't even thought about yet that are going to be coming into play as we go into this new world.
Okay, let's draw stumps. I'd like to really thank John, Siobhan, Becky, Alastair for taking the time out, and for everybody for listening in today to this session. It's been really useful from my perspective to hear all these things. I hope everybody took something out of it. We now go offline and we hand over to Aaron Harris, if we haven't gone offline already. Okay, bye everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, bye.